Welcome, horse racing fans. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and this is NYRA Bets YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode where we are focused on the Schuylerville Stakes and doing a preview. I'm going to be joined momentarily by Acacia Clement to talk about that race, but make sure to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. We have a lot of great content, whether it is standalone tutorials on handicapping and betting or race previews, weekly capping the card episodes, and so much more. So thank you again for tuning into this Schuyler Stakes preview, which of course is taking place on opening day at Saratoga. That's right, it's here. It's a holiday for so many of us, opening day at the spa, and that is going to be Thursday, July 11th. So without any further ado, let me bring on my co-host to the show, Snowbirds, which if you've been watching on X, you know a little bit about, but you know her more prominently through America's Day at the Races and NYRA, and that is Acacia Clement. Acacia, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Matthew, thanks for having me. I know it's fun. It's nice that, we're doing this from our own home. So we're both in Saratoga. We're not in different parts of the country this time we're doing it, which is fun.
It is. You're not in like Dubai or, you're not in like Medan, or you're like, you're just, that was, we've been coast to coast and across the world. So, but it's nice to have you in the same zip code, at least this time around. So obviously excited to talk about the Schuylerville. And before we get to that, you are one of the people who, you go down to the Ocala sales a lot. You scout these horses when they're so young. And I think so many times people, looking at these types of 2-year-old races will just look at that one, maybe 2 races on the past performances. You have a little bit more history with some of these horses, and maybe just talk a little bit about that progression from kind of being at a sale to, for a horse, what you're looking for there, and then getting them onto the track and progressing into this type of a race.
Yeah, it's interesting when you have these 2-year-old sales horses coming in. There's a couple things to look at. Obviously, one of the benefits for handicappers is that you have the opportunity to go to the Fasig-Tipton or to the OBS sales website, and you can watch that horse breeze. Usually, they go an eighth or a quarter of a mile. Sometimes, for instance, you saw the Lothenbach dispersal take place this winter, and all of those horses just galloped in the sale. You have the opportunity to watch that video as well as looking at the pedigree. And I think that it's a huge resource. And we talk about it a lot on the show. We show a lot of those 2-year-old workouts, but don't be afraid to go to the sales page, because sometimes you'll look and just basics and it'll say this horse worked 10 flat or 9 and 4, which is a very fast work for the eighth of a mile. And then you'll watch it and you'll see that the horse was slugging out or was really having to be asked very hard for that, or just maybe wasn't moving the best. And then you'll see one that maybe worked that fast but just was doing it effortlessly. And those are just some huge clues to be able to look at from the 2-year-old sales. Obviously, a lot can change from the time that they're in the 2-year-old sales because they're really cranked up at that time. That's really the fastest eighth of the mile that they'll ever go in their lives. They won't train that fast. They most likely won't race that fast. So of course you're hoping for them to be finishing quickly. But typically, I know, from personal experience, every time my husband Miguel and I are at the 2-year-old sales, any horse that we look at or scout for owners or owners are going to buy, typically they'll go to the farm and just have a break for at least 30 days after the 2-year-old sale. So if you see that, that's usually what a lot of horsemen will do. Some go right on with them, and sometimes that's possible. Some of the horses can really take it, but I just have found that really mentally they benefit from that. And then they come in, they start training. Obviously they know their job, but then they get acclimated to the program. The trainer can see what surface they want. Are they going to be really early and precocious? Are they going to need a little bit more time? And that's when you're really able to gauge. But it is a good resource because you can look at the pedigree and you can watch those breezes. And then the ones that I've seen at the sales, I like to see how they've developed when they come to the racetrack and make sure that they've continued to progress.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of pedigrees, we've had some very precocious pedigrees, particularly in this first crop group that we have seen from Vekoma in particular, who has just taken horse racing by storm in terms of his first crop and winning at over a 50% clip, which is just incredible. I've been asking other people if they remember a first crop that kind of has started this strong, and it really strains the memory banks to come up with one that has been so precocious to start with. Those Vekoma babies, is it one of those things where at this point you really, no matter what the odds are, you can't leave them off your ticket? It just really has been impressive at this point.
It has been really impressive. We were able to buy one at the sales because they sold really well too. But really, really happy with the one that we have. And he's just been class. And it's funny because last year at the yearling sale, so my father-in-law, Christophe Mott, usually is not a first crop sire guy. He likes proven sires. He's, very much, unless there's something like really special about the horse, he wants a stallion that's already shown what he can do with their progeny. And at the yearling sale last year, he just said, like, I think Vacoma's going to be an amazing stallion. I think he's going to be great. And everybody was kind of like, wow, where did that come from? Normally he's not a fan of first crop stallions. And I mean, he's absolutely right. And obviously many other horsemen have seen that as well. They've been so precocious. They're really fast. There were a couple of really, really, really nice ones at the 2-year-old sales. We're going to see one of them in the Schuylerville as well. Viggiedal for Steve Asmussen, who was consigned by Kieran Dunn and worked 9 and 3 and was kind of a buzz horse of the sale, even going into it, and the way that she was coming into that sale. So it's exciting. It's a lot of fun for a horse that just a couple years ago we saw running races like the Met Mile with no fans in the stands, and now people are really able to appreciate his progeny.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's been quite the start for him. And well, that's a good segue. So let's go and talk about this Schuylerville Stakes going 6 furlongs on the dirt. We have an 11 horse field, and your morning line favorite is the number 5 Complexion. And she looked so good breaking her maiden and did it so effortlessly as well on a front running ride under Johnny Velasquez for trainer Danny Gargan. But the real buzz around this horse is the fact that she's the half sister to Jack Christopher, who was a horse that so many of us, myself included, maybe I'm projecting. I just absolutely love Jack Christopher so much. He was such a great horse. And I was, just sad that we didn't get to see more of him on the track, but so incredibly talented. And, obviously 7-2 is a rather lukewarm favorite. And it speaks to the depth of this particular field when looking across that. You already mentioned the number 10 Viggiedal. Where else did your eye go, or maybe just expand on what you like about maybe either the favorite or the number 10 horse?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see these two at least knock heads in here. And I think we have a lukewarm favorite because it's 2-year-olds. Andy Sterling and I talk about this all the time. For horses that win first time out or are going to be heavy favorites first time out, oftentimes they're really geared up for that debut race. And sometimes they don't take a step forward, but in fact take a step back in their subsequent start. And that's not a bad thing. It's just kind of a natural progression, especially with 2-year-olds. So you really want to be able to see the ones that are going to be able to continue to develop and continue to move on. And Complexion on her speed figure is not necessarily heads and tails above the competition of what she's going to be facing in here. Very comparable, in fact, with Viggiedal, and even comparable with Slang as well for Norm Cassie. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing with the lukewarm favoritism there. But Complexion, I'm excited. She even looks like Jack Christopher with the big white face, like dipped in paint, which is really cool. And it should be a lot of fun. She looks like she has quality. She's not quite as fast as her big brother just yet, but we'll definitely learn a lot about her on Thursday.
Yeah, no, for sure. And one of the interesting things that I always try to make note of with these 2-year-old races is the fact that so many first-time debut 2-year-olds will win in front-running fashion to the point because they are, the point that you made, pretty cranked up for that effort. And then all of a sudden you get to a race like this, which is their second or third start, and you now have a field full of 6 or 7 horses, all of whom won going gate to wire. And I often make the joke, they can't all go gate to wire this time around. So horses are going to have to come up with a plan B, or they're going to have to show maybe another dimension, or they're, in terms of taking off, and maybe you're just rating slightly off the pace and what have you. And so in these types of races, I do find myself interested in horses that have shown the ability to come from a little off the pace. And so for me, even though she just raced recently, a horse like the number 6 Carmen's Candy Girl Jar at 6-1, very professional debut, actually was sitting last at one point in a very short field. And you could tell that's one that just got stronger later in that race, and stretching out to 6 furlongs and maybe having some pace in front of her might be advantageous.
I completely agree. And also she's I think a feel-good story for the day too. She's named in honor of Carmen Barrera, who we lost a couple years ago. Definitely a mainstay at NYRA. So a special name in there as well, which is pretty cool. And a homebred for Rapoli stable. And she's also a New York bred, which is cool. And she won against New York bred company first time out. But I agree. I thought that she was interesting because of everything that you said, as well as Sherbini, a second-time starter for Mark Casse, who was not quite as far back, but she was a generous price. And after years of spending the winters at Gulfstream, often we'd always talk about it. Oh, Mark Casse, not first time out, not first time out. And I found that the ones that do win first time out from his barn are the ones that really have a lot of quality. And so I'm curious to see what she can do moving forward. She was a pretty low price at the 2-year-old sale of just 40,000, but she got a good figure. She showed a little bit of tenacity in there as well. And one thing I think overall I'm saying is that the top finishers out of the Astoria, I probably don't want going into here. And I think we have some really intriguing new faces.
That was exactly where I was going with regards to the number 1 Aoraki and the number 8 with what in the literal for Jenna Antonucci. You see they're a little bit higher priced on the morning line, 8 to 1, 10 to 1 respectively, despite the fact what in the literal was the winner of that race over Aoraki. The inside rail is always, I think, a difficult thing to ask for a 2-year-old. I remember a couple of years ago, I believe Witt, broke from that inside rail and broke really poorly. Now, he was super talented and was able to overcome it, but that's always a challenge, I feel like, in these sprints for horses on the inside. And a horse even like Aoraki, had good speed, but you do have to worry about breaking from that position. But I was going to ask, a horse coming out of something like a stakes race winning last time out, having a success at Saratoga in that race, obviously. What is it that maybe has you looking elsewhere? I mean, is it just the overall quality of this field has just gotten a little bit stronger than what we saw in the Tremont? Or is it something where maybe that race maybe took a little bit out and that was one where maybe going 6 furlongs now this time is maybe going up against what in the literal might be able to do?
I think it's a combination of things. I do think that the field is stronger in here, which is to be expected. As more 2-year-olds start and they're coming in off a maiden race or coming into a race like this, because we've seen more just hit the racetrack earlier in June. There's just going to be less that have made their debut as of yet. Also, as we've talked about during the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival at Saratoga, and I know that the Astoria took place early in the week, but in general, we were not seeing horses really close very much. And I'm of the opinion that the kickback was really impacting horses more so than the track being speed favoring. But I do think we saw some figures get exaggerated. Arthur's Ride, a perfect example with the 111 buyer speed figure being able to wire the field. He's a very nice horse, but so I think we saw a little bit of that. And there were not many races where we saw the closers really make much of an impact, particularly, as you said, with 2-year-olds when a lot of them haven't even shown that they can close yet. So I just kind of want to see it again because of that track and because of the tougher competition that we're seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To be honest, I had to talk my dad off placing Breeders' Cup Classic Futures bet on Arthur's Ride. I think after that opening weekend, he was just like, "This horse is amazing." I'm like, "Dad, easy." He is very good, but just let's see how the rest of the year plays out a little bit. All right. I will just briefly mention a horse that's a little bit of a price that you mentioned actually briefly, which is the number 4 Slang for Norm Casse. This one won second time out and came out of a very productive initial race that, if I'm not mistaken, produced 4 next out winners, which I don't want to throw around the term a key race or anything like that, but it certainly was good to see a productive race out of those, because sometimes those 4.5 furlong races, they may not always be very productive, but to see those horses take progressions next time out was encouraging. This one was able to do so, winning next time out at a generous price at 10 to 1 at Churchill Downs, going 5.5. And already that race has produced another next out winner, Mrs. Worldwide. So it was good to see that development. And Omaha Beach as a sire is one that I tend to like on the dirt and sprinting on the dirt. He just got his first win as a sire on the synthetic the other day. And so, he was like 0 for 38 by that point. And I wanted to say it was like union rags on the turf. I wanted to tell people, stop trying to do this. He should be on the dirt. And so, but he's one I always take very seriously. And that's a generous price. I feel like 10 to 1 on a horse that showed some talent.
It is, and she's had 2 starts already, so she definitely showed a big improvement from her first to second race, and, that could kind of be a thing where, like we talked about, maybe some of these horses are just really cranked up to win first time out, whereas Slang obviously is a horse that's not that. She's the one that's kind of gradually progressing in the right direction. I like that too. So often in these 2-year-old maiden races, and we saw it just happen closing day on the turf. There were only a couple with experience, and I think experience ran 1-2 in that New York bred 2-year-old race. Sometimes the experience at this stage of the game is just so important. And look, is the winner of the Astoria going to be the best 2-year-old moving forward? Not necessarily. It's just going to be the horses that are ready at that time. And some are just going to be ready earlier than others.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is one of the reasons I love 2-year-old races throughout the year. You often can find good value because horses, to your point, make progression from race to race. And you can sometimes see something that might not be on the page that will indicate this horse is going to be coming next time out, the third time out. To your point earlier about Mark Casse horses, knowing when those horses, Shug McGahee, another one, usually second, third time out for that sort of a trainer with his 2-year-old. So there are those who are going to have them cranked up first time out. Wesley Ward, certainly one that comes to mind. Always gets them ready at Keeneland for those 4.5 furlong sprints. But, it's about the, as we get later on into the season, it is about the progression, how they continue to stretch out and so forth. So the final thing I'll mention is, and ask you about, is there's projected to be a fair amount of rain on Thursday, and obviously that would lead to a wet track. Not a lot of these horses have experience over a wet track. Is that something, because there's so limited experience, do you dive into the pedigrees at all, or do you just go, listen, this is my opinion, and we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out on the track on Thursday?
Yes and no. I do look at the pedigrees just out of curiosity if the dam or the sibling was a horse that obviously seemed to love a wet track. I also think that it's important what type of wet track it is. As we've all seen throughout the years in Saratoga, anything can happen. It can be like 1,000,000 degrees like today, and then in an hour it's going to be pouring, and then it's freezing, and then it's hot again. It could be all of that just in one day. So I think it's just important to pay attention how the track is playing. Is it sealed? Does it seem like there's some standing water on it? Is it very sloppy? Is it looking kind of heavy? All of those things I think are pieces that are very important when it comes into the handicapping of these races, and how horses that are maybe trying to come from off of it will be affected, as in taking kickback. 2-year-olds, especially the ones that have broken their maiden going wire to wire, are not going to be seasoned with kickback. And that's going to be a challenge for them anyway. It can be even a bigger challenge if it's a very wet, kind of sticky type of track. So I think in that case, that's where I would pay attention to it a little bit more. But I think it's so tough to predict the weather up here that if you have a strong opinion, I would just stick with it unless you see something throughout the day in the way the track is playing, or if the kickback looks pretty significant, and that could impact what you think a horse may be able to take.
Excellent. Well, that's great advice for all the players out there. And Acacia, again, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out and going over the Schuylerville Stakes with us. Really appreciate it. And you're going to have a busy week this week. When are the folks going to? I know everybody knows where to find you, but when are they going to be on America's Day at the Races this week?
Yes, I am doing Talking Horses on opening day with Andy. So kicking off the meet, which is fun. And then I'll be on early Thursday and Friday. I'll be on sometime throughout the day on Saturday. And then I'm also hosting the Harness Show at night on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm guessing that means I'll probably be on late on Sunday, but yeah, it'll be a busy week, that's for sure.
I always forget about the harness show. That's always a lot of
Yeah.
fun because, like, I'll get home and turn it on, and then you're still there and
Yeah.
doing stuff, and I'm like, oh, all right, I'm just gonna
I'll
watch
still
Acacia
be
now for the next
there.
2 hours.
Yeah, I'll probably just, like, bring a little sleeping bag to the set and, be
Yeah,
there, and I'll be ready for training in a few hours. Yeah.
I was gonna say you'll be ready for Sunday morning that way.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for joining me. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. Really appreciate all the support of everybody subscribing to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe for Acacia Clement. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.